From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome, everybody, to Thursday at 3 in the Rare Book and Special Collections Division, part of the Rare Book Forum. Some of you are familiar faces, but I'll leave it to Peter to draw in a whole new crowd as well. It shouldn't surprise any of you that if you know Peter Zilahy, that he's going to be speaking about time. I met Peter when he first arrived as a Kluge scholar 2 years ago, yes. At that time, I was working in the reading room and at the desk in the reference section, which is a grand theater seat for the division, but also you're kind of a prime target. So Peter came by, and as often as those of you who know Peter will know, a short conversation with Peter turns into endless story after story, and it became kind of this moment that I would look forward to when he would walk in the reading room. We would go over everything from pan-Slavic backgrounds to any number of issues with books to his current work. So it's been a real pleasure to have him associated with the division all these years. Today he's going to be speaking on, in essence, perception, or how we relay our perception of time and timelessness. I won't say more because he, as you know, if you know him, will have a very unique take on the subject matter. So please welcome Peter, and it's all yours.
Mark, thank you very much for the introduction. It's strange how memory works, because I remember our first encounter that you were the one who was telling those stories. Endless stories. So the title is Time and Timelessness, everything you always wanted to know about time, but you were afraid to ask. The brackets naturally refer to the Q&A at the end. So because of the camera, I will mostly read, because I wouldn't like to make a mistake. So my last talk at the Library of Congress was on visual thinking, with lots of images and visual aids. So this time I decided to keep it more personal due to the subject matter, that is time and timelessness, and also because of the furniture in this room. Look at that amazing piece there. I mean, if you are getting bored, just admire it, and you can pass your time in perfect visual harmony. If you don't see that table at the end, you should really check that out. That's an amazing collector's item. So I should call this work in progress, but that would already mean taking a side in a debate that is literally as old as time. So there's another lecture at 4 p.m. at the Kluge Center, so no hard feelings for those who will have to go. I just wanted to inform the rest of the people that if anybody leaves the room before the fat lady sings, it's not because she's bombing. As you can see, Thursdays are popular for lectures and talks, and Thursdays are also popular in literature. There are novels whose plot takes place in a single day. Mrs. Dalloway takes place on a Wednesday in June 1923, perhaps because Thursday had already been taken by James Joyce's Ulysses, also in June, exactly 113 years ago. The books that you can see on the table there, and perhaps hold in your hands later, were written by me, and as you will see, are full of images as opposed to my lecture. They play with the theme of childhood and dictatorship. One of them looks like a children's dictionary, and it's about, among other things, a childhood spent behind the Iron Curtain. The idea was that everybody was treated like children by the regime, not just me, but my parents and teachers as well, so a children's dictionary seemed to be the ideal form to write about the era. I'll give you a short example. Bathtime was during the news. Every now and then, Mother would look in to see if I was all right. Dad was watching TV in the living room. To protect me from the lies, they had to know the details. I could hear Mother sighing, what a mess I was making. I'm flooding the apartment. I dived down. Under the water, I heard a voice telling me what had happened in the world that day. A landslide killed 150 people in Bangladesh. A revolution broke out in West Africa. A new kindergarten and an Olympic swimming pool were opened. An MTK beat Fradi 2-1. I had no idea who was sending the messages or why, but clearly they had plans for me because they also told me what the weather was going to be like. The following day, I could distinguish several voices in the tub, which pointed towards an organization. This manner of communication seemed logical. I couldn't send them messages because you can't talk underwater, and they could only get in touch with me without my parents and teachers knowing during my bath time. I didn't understand why it was so important for the organization that I should have detailed information on the latest war games in Poland, or which Transdanubian towns were being granted city status, but I knew that if I paid attention, sooner or later I'd be given a sign. My life gained a deeper meaning underwater when one Sunday, Mother was washing my hair and, unsuspecting, she pushed my head into the water. A pleasant female voice whispered in my ear that the harvest had been flattened by hail. I knew immediately what was expected of me, and to be honest, I had no objections. To make a big mess. From that day on, I sabotaged the development of our people's democracy like a busy honeybee. Earthquake, power failures, and gas explosions marked my way. I would figure out the location of military objectives on the basis of intelligence I received in the bathtub. When a factory or a power plant was inaugurated, I would be there doing what I had to do. Comecon fiddled at repairs behind the Iron Curtain, little suspecting that a stone was being thrown inside the glass house. In the opening of Either Or, Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, talks about a brazen bull, which was both an instrument of torture and music. Phalaris, the tyrant of a Greek city-state, more than 2,000 years ago, had this device for his pleasures. The bronze bull was heated from below, and the victim was slowly roasted while his screams came through as music with the help of various pipe and some clever engineering. This actually happened. There are no recordings of the musical quality because, as you know, recording devices are a rather modern form of torture, and the brazen bull is ancient. What is a poet? Kierkegaard asks. An unhappy person who conceals profound anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that his cries sound like beautiful music. And the crowd goes, sing again, may new sufferings torture your soul. How music and torture was never far from each other is well illustrated by the British heavy metal band Iron Maiden, that was named after a torture device of similar sorts. Only that device never actually existed, but was completely made up. They do look amazing, so you can still find Iron Maidens in torture museums around the world, if that's where you hang out. A fictional torture device sounds like a collection of bad poetry, or a novel that is literally a crime scene. We've all been there. By the way, bad poetry causes dementia. Even if you're not listening, just sitting nearby, it's like secondary smoking and lung cancer. Just Google it. Anyway, this is a perfect place to make a statement. Be it philosophy, literature, or science, there are only good books and bad books. Good books connect the world, bad books make money and or cause dementia. Plato and Seneca, Kierkegaard and Nietzsche wrote some great literary works. Even Wittgenstein had some amazing one-liners. At the same time, a lot of good literature turned out to contain great philosophical or scientific insights. Dostoevsky not only influenced Kafka a great deal, but Einstein as well. You must look at the bigger picture, which is also why I'm not showing small images this time. Coherence pays back in the long run. So, to be fair, Kierkegaard writes that he would rather be a swineherd understood by his pigs than a poet misunderstood by people. So if you are a poet, you just need to find a place where your screams and pain are appreciated as beautiful music. Or start the blog. This section, no, I'm not going. It's enough of my go-to humor. Dictatorships have great audiences. And not just because people cannot leave, but also because everything has a double meaning. To read between the lines is key to survival, but also a creative process that's much more entertaining for an informed crowd than any form of l'art pour l'art. Your expectations define the reading. Sometimes you cannot see the forest from the metaphors. To be informed does not necessarily mean to have enough information, but to be given clues. Clues for a reading of a state of affairs that makes sense or seem to make sense and makes your life more meaningful or seem to make your life more meaningful. Meaning is in the eye of the beholder. When I was a child, growing up in a dictatorship, everything had a political meaning. Books could sell 10 times more copies than today for the underlying meaning. This has disappeared for decades. Perhaps it's coming back now. But for a long time, politics was not that interesting for the general audience. Though a few months ago I read some stats that I did not double check, but apparently Breitbart had more hits than Pornhub. Which means that with successful marketing, politics could reach out for more people than we expected. You should really stop this. Censorship can also be a source of success. Back in the day, when I was a young poet, one avant-garde magazine published a few of my teenage works. The issue had a strange cover that became a scandal. It had a caricature of the Hungarian coat of arms going back more than 1,000 years, but instead of the two angels holding the shield, they portrayed two horny devils masturbating. This has, of course, freaked out a few conservative members of the parliament, and the leader of the Farmers' Party was waving the magazine in front of the parliament in live coverage, asking for the copies to be smashed immediately. But because of the scandal and the free advertisement, they sold 5 times more copies than ever, and a lot more people could read my poems. Moving on. Not only dictatorships have great audiences, but dictatorships are not necessarily bad for literature. Bad for the individual, but not for the quality of the art. In fact, most great works of literature we know of were written in some form of tyranny. Since democratic governments are pretty new, in fact, Greek democracy only happened in a few cities for a short period of time, and it was widely regarded as a bad idea for a long time. But every coin has two sides. Kierkegaard also wrote, "The tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins." Phalaris apparently was overthrown by his people and tortured to death in his favorite musical instrument, so his slaves could all hear his swan song from the Brazen Bull. We are playthings of the gods. A very Greek idea. It's everywhere in Plato and the Greek tragedies, and in spite of what you may have heard in history class, more than the overwhelming majority of the Greek population lived in some sort of tyranny. Now, in a good old 20th century dictatorship, history is cut off from the past and people are forced into living in an eternal present. My country was cut off from the network that it used to be part of for a millennia. The two sides of the coin in the 20th century were either the fake enthusiasm of totalitarian regimes like Stalinism and fascism, pretending that everything is happening right now, like never before, or the version I grew up in, where you had the impression that nothing's happening and nothing's ever going to change. When I was a kid, most people, including the most educated, seriously believed that the division of Cold War Europe and the rest of the world will remain like that forever. I was one who didn't. I studied history and I learned that things change. I thought the wall will come down someday and I wanted to see it before that happens. So I went to all the nearby countries in the former Soviet bloc to see the end and participate in the protests that changed the system. I saw the euphoria. The moment when people all of a sudden started to believe that finally they can take their lives in their own hands. It was a carnival in many cities, especially in Berlin, Prague, and Belgrade. So here's a paragraph from my book. In Belgrade, time is measured in faces. After a week, I began to recognize people in the crowd. In a year's time, I would recognize everyone. Anyone who has face also has time. Watches are worn as ornaments. The hands enclosing an arbitrary angle that matches the wearer's mood. It's not possible for me to be late if I stay on the street. The time for the demonstration can be read off the faces. You look at someone and you know it's time. Neither of you will get there on the agreed time, but you will meet somewhere else where you wouldn't have met if you had gone to where you were supposed to meet. Belgrade had escaped sidereal time. People look one another in the eye. They are whirling on a merry-go-round in a shower of confetti. A chain reaction of faces in a triggered explosion. Belgrade faces are incendiary, quick to flare up. It is impossible to become invisible. A Belgrade crowd is not faceless. Out of any two faces, one is always you. The way we look at time is deeply rooted in our habits and lifestyle. We observe changes and we call it time. We had very different observation behind the Iron Curtain, and what behind means is already a viewpoint. You were behind from our perspective. This could be a source of many thought experiments, just take Vietnam, for example. It took me decades of my adult years to realize that if you have lost Vietnam, then we must have won. And then who are we? And of course, nobody really looked at it that way, and you don't see many blockbusters from the Viet Cong perspective either. If they were to do it, they should start by imagining how time was passing in those rabbit holes. Can we step out of our box and think of time beyond our own experience? Or are we always going to be late? Timelessness, similarly, is also based on your experiences. So your timelessness and my timelessness may never sit at the same table, or the same universe, for one. Timelessness seems to be a state when you have all the time in the world, which does not make sense if we consider time as a rhythm. Experiencing time can also add to our sensation in seeing another country or another continent as profoundly alien. When I was 13 years old, my parents drove me and my brother to Western Europe one summer holiday. We have never been to the West before. Passing Austria, we didn't even blink. It didn't feel that much different. But when we arrived to Germany, we saw American soldiers with tattoos and big motorbikes, just like in an Oliver Stone movie. I'm not kidding, we got genuinely scared and we wanted to go home. The West felt cold and cruel. We wanted to go back to our safe little communist dictatorship. Luckily, my dad didn't approve. On the two sides of the Iron Curtain, people had very different views on time. In America, it seems nobody has time. Everybody's busy. You buy your time. We had a completely different idea. We had a lot of time on our hands. You could learn Japanese or Swahili, higher math, whatever. You had time, but you did not have things, as opposed to the other side that had a lot of things to play with, but no time to do so. Behind the Iron Curtain, you could visit your friends at 2 a.m., no problem, just knock on the door. You did not have to call. Anyway, few people had phones. And the reason for this was that we were equally unimportant. When you are unimportant, you have all the time in the world. The idea of a job behind the Iron Curtain was that you were there with the intention of getting nothing done, because both good and bad work could be a problem, while nothing becomes nothing. It's safe. And not being safe in a dictatorship can be quite different from what may scare you in these parts. When I traveled more and I saw that in the West everybody is so busy, even the cleaning lady is busy for weeks ahead, you kind of have to make an appointment with your children if you wanted to see them. They said it was culture shock, but it was really about time. You may call it cultural jet lag. If you ever had children, you know that time changes around the baby, as if you have entered a different time zone. We don't know how long a night or a day is to a child, Jordan Berger argues in Fortunate Man. It may be that subjectively a childhood is much longer than the rest of a lifetime. There is no dedicated sensory organ that detects time, which again might suggest that the passing of time is a psychological phenomenon. Or time ticks fast or slow depending on our age, emotional state, whether we are in pain or in love or just bored. As a child, we learn time by playing. Just like lion cubs learn to kill, we learn to kill time. How we deal with time reflects on us. In New York, we are watching the ball drop on Times Square. We are counting backwards and we mean forwards. We either live in the past or in the future, but unable to live in the moment, unable to exist without references, without measuring our time constantly, while we are also measuring our importance in comparison to others. That's what we do, waiting for a moment, and by waiting together, it feels more real. We are afraid to miss it. We are afraid of falling out of time, of not existing, of not having a life. So we try to prove our existence by being busy. Facebook is a perfect way to avoid the presence, by being constantly present. A perfect distraction with a measure of likes. Another aspect I should perhaps mention here, still talking about the point of view, is the role of humor in a dictatorship. We watched television and we saw very serious, very boring people telling lies. Then we went down to the pub and then we heard jokes that were true. You could only tell the truth as a joke. Otherwise, you could get arrested. I still do not trust people who are always serious. They lie. A lack of movement seems to be pretty absurd if you're able to look at it from a distance. Absurdity was the daily bread of a communist regime. Absurd humor thrived behind the Iron Curtain together with absurd theater. When life is absurd, normality can seem unnatural, even revolutionary. The riot police breaking through the fog come marching down the embankment. The aesthetic perhaps too blatant, but authentic. Some people start to run, but most stand transfixed, as if they were at the shooting of a costume drama. In the scene, medieval men in armor are marching in formation, the clanking of the shields and the thud of the boots imparting an air of heightened solemnity to the troop. The movements are not robot-like, but loose. After having to stand around helplessly for so long, they feel a sense of liberation. They are fired by the will to fight. They approach with steps neither over hasty nor leisurely, but rather homely. Like someone going out to check the mail who knows full well that it won't run away. His steaming hot breakfast is waiting for him. He's just gone out for a moment, except he has spotted something in the grass, some large object, a forgotten bowl or a pair of sunglasses, and he proceeds to kick it to the side with his leg. In a communist dictatorship, nobody is important individually, and money is not worth much, so you can only create value by sacrifice. Human sacrifice is crucial to the regime. What's wrong with a little human sacrifice compared to eternity? Dictators would say. In a universe in which everything is laid out eternally and unchanging, innovation is impossible. Time is an illusion, according to the ancient Greek philosopher Parmenides, and the deeper reality is eternal and unchanging. Now he has departed from this strange world, a little ahead of me. That signifies nothing. For us believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Albert Einstein wrote this a month before his own death about the death of his lifelong friend, Michele Besso. For Einstein, the past and the future exist eternally. Time does not flow. It just is. In fact, all physical theories so far devised, Newtonian mechanics, Einstein's two theories of relativity, even quantum mechanics, are time-symmetric. No arrow of time is indicated. Thank you. There is no physical reason why a smashed plate might not rejoin itself. This is hard science, not fiction. Our gene sequences are 95% identical to those of yeast. The difference between yeast and the human being is largely a matter of organization. We share 50% of our genetic code with a banana. The same goes for a book. Content is one thing, but it's a matter of how you organize your material. Please do not understand me too quickly. André Gide wrote, there is a reason why we think slowly. Those who think fast, they do not think. They are hoarding information. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brains of people with high IQs tend to be highly integrated with neural paths connecting distant brain regions, while less intelligent people's brain build simpler, shorter routes. But no one knows why some brains construct much longer range connections than others. Perhaps it has to do with the bigger picture, or a bigger illusion. I guess it's time for a little Kafka. I'm going to give you 3 quick quotes. The meaning of life is that it stops. I am free, and that is why I'm lost. I am a cage in search of a bird. Reading Kafka, time and space seems to be very different from your own world. You can never get from A to B, and it's hard to tell whether it's because of temporal or spatial relations. Another quote. The first sign of the beginning of understanding is the wish to die. That's kind of the definition of time, according to Kafka, in my interpretation. There is an infinite amount of hope in this universe, but not for us, and that's the definition of space. I would like to point out, if needed, that this is humor, and if it doesn't sound funny, you still have a lot of time. We are dying, that's what we do, and we need a sense of humor for the journey. So let's talk about death and time. So there are 2 kinds of literature in this respect. Here it is hard to refrain from the joke that there are 2 kinds of people in the world, those who say that there are 2 kinds of people in the world and those who say there aren't. So there are two kinds of literature. One that says, I'm going to die. It's a scream, but all we hear is just beautiful music, of course. That's the domain of poetry. And the other kind says, hey, we are all going to die. This could be a novel going on for 1,000 pages or a play by Shakespeare where you have all the characters laid out in the end. With every work of art, we create a specific form of time for or against death, depending on your disposition. But before it starts to get way too serious, here's a bit for comic relief. So time is measured by death, in this case not necessarily your own. For those who may not know the names in the next paragraph, they are all communist dictators and bad people. So my bumpy road to sexual maturity was paved with the death of communist dictators. My first sexual experience coincided with the death of Mao Zedong. I was bitten by a girl called Diana in nursery school. My voice broke when Tito died, and I first came when Brezhnev went. For 3 days, there was nothing but classical music on the radio, which I thought was overdoing it. Some schools even closed. Then for a long time, nothing. As an experiment, I took a girl to the movies, but the film was too good and I got cramps in my hand. Events accelerated in high school. It was only a couple of months between the first kiss and the first frantic fumbling. Following Andropov, Chernenko also checked out. A couple more weeks and it was Enver's turn, but I'd rather not go into that. I first found out about the G-spot when Ceausescu was executed. Kim Il-sung cast new light on my broadening horizons. Luckily, the charges were dropped. Fidel. This I wrote a long time before. Still waiting. Our expectations define time more than the orbit of suns and planets. If you can look death right in the eye, if you have no trouble going gently into that good night, if you take away that fear and horror of death, what would you write about? What would you do if you had all the time in the world? What would even the word do mean? Time for a little Dostoevsky. The devil appears in Ivan Karamazov in an old-fashioned cloth, wearing a huge golden ring and no watch. For the devil, time is relative, or at least not measured in an earthly manner. In the theory of relativity, time is not independent of space, but united with it. Einstein was reported to have remarked that he learned more from Dostoevsky than from other scientists. Dostoevsky's work is a quest for a cosmic order that would not ignore the sufferings of individuals. While Einstein attempts to find harmony in the universe on the large scale that would not ignore action on the nano level. He was known for his fierce resistance to new theories on quantum mechanics that would imply that microscopic processes are random. Einstein's famous remark, God does not play dice, is an analogy to Ivan Karamazov's rejection to any harmony built onto the suffering of a child. For this would imply that God plays with the fates of individuals, and that would be, as mentioned earlier, a very Greek idea indeed. But Dostoevsky's clock was ticking in a more Judeo-Christian manner. Ivan also complains to Yosha that his mind is too three-dimensional, and he would need to think 4D to understand divine harmony. He's too down to earth and does not get time, even in his dream. The devil wears no watch, a kind of a 3D guy. Talking about revolution or space-time. And now Nabokov, who is said to have been both a chronophiliac, a lover of time, and a chronophobiac, someone who dreads the loss of things in time. Perhaps a good angle on this is that he was a lepidopterist, a butterfly collector, who collects miniature monuments of death. The main character in Ada, his most complex novel, claims, I confess I do not believe in time, and then goes on about the highest enjoyment of timelessness, an ecstasy, and behind the ecstasy, a sense of oneness with sun and stone, a thrill of gratitude to whom it may concern. Nabokov's hero negates the future, and so does Proust, by the way, and embraces the past, which he equates with death, and conceives eternity as a work of art. Space is comedy, time is tragedy, and the suspicious hyphen between them. No, he does not like the idea of space-time. That would be, of course, tragicomedy. In Ada, the core of the book, the texture of time is revealed by the intervals. Nothing prevents mankind as such from having no future at all, either by evolving into a novo sapiens, which will enjoy other varieties of being and dreaming beyond man's notion of time, or by evolving into a subhuman slime. I wish to caress time. I delight sensually in time, in its stuff and spread, in the fall of its folds, in the very palpability of its greyish gauze. Time is rhythm, the insect rhythm of a warm, humid night, brain ripple, breathing, the drum in my temple. These are our faithful timekeepers, and reason corrects the feverish beat. Maybe the only thing that hints at a sense of time is rhythm, the great gap between the black beats, the tender interval. The regular throb itself merely brings back the miserable idea of measurement. But in between, something like true time lurks. If my eye tells me something about space, my ear tells me something about time. I can listen to time only between stresses, listening not to time itself, but to the blood current coursing through my brain. Space is the imposter. Some critics may say that this is pseudoscience and pseudo-philosophy, but there's also poetry in science. Lee Smolin came up with the theory of cosmological natural selection to explain the universe how the universe got going in time. He reconceives the universe as if it were some kind of organism. Everything in the universe is evolving at every scale into genuine novelty, according to Smolin. He believes that at the quantum level, the deeper reality is time and not space. I think it likely that space will turn out to be an illusion, Smolin remarks, a way to organize our impressions of things on a large scale, but only a rough and emergent way to see the world as a whole. And now back to Kafka, who writes, "By believing passionately in something, we create it. The non-existence is whatever we have not sufficiently desired. So a lack of existence is a lack of desire. There is a dreamy quality to the trial. The court itself is not real, but K's reactions to the court are real. Whether dreams are more or less real than our daily life depends on the level of desire. Kafka had dreamt a world that we call real today, and we have to face it on a daily basis. If you visit the Kafka Museum in Prague, you will find that the shop is bigger than the rest of the place. There is Kafka on everything. You can even buy Kafka underwear. And if you know that the very image had already been doctored by his publisher back in the day, you may say it's rather Kafkaesque. Today we even call Kafkaesque stuff that was written way before Kafka. Reality is imprecise, said the physicist Werner Heisenberg, which is rather Kafkaesque, coming from a Nobel laureate who was in charge of the Nazi atomic bomb project. According to Kierkegaard, the truth is a trap. You cannot get it without it getting you. Niels Bohr once said that quantum mechanics only makes sense if you change the meaning of the word understand. Einstein said that the problem of the now worried him seriously. He explained that the experience of the now means nothing special for man, something essentially different from the past and the future, but that this important difference does not and cannot occur within physics, that this experience cannot be grasped by science seemed to him a matter of painful but inevitable regret. Physical theories do not privilege the now. Physics tells us that everything that will ever happen in the universe has already happened. Dostoevsky writes of the condemned man's last night, in which each moment stretches into eternity. And now one paragraph from my novel. I was a virgin, but it didn't bother me. I didn't have a clue. The world was black and white. You could watch it on TV. It's still in front of me, extra time in the Holland-Argentina final, the link-up of the Baader-Meinhof and the Salute Apollo, the death of the king. I didn't know who Elvis was, but my dad was gutted. The gas explosion at Jana, the volcanic clouds over Mount St. Helens, the Hungarian spaceflight, and the Rubik Cube World Championship in Budapest. Sports were exciting in black and white. During a boxing match, you had to count the number of stripes on the guy's socks. I even remember how many stripes my first date had. not sure about the color of the eyes. I see her in black and white. After the first kiss, my parents bought a color TV, and it turned out that the Dutch are orange, the Italians are blue, and there are green and red devils. Only the Germans remained black and white, as if they were being punished. Their country was split into two as well. I almost felt sorry for them. What we think and what we know about the universe has changed through the centuries and will change just the same way in the future. Today, people believe in spaceship, and that's what they expect appearing on the sky, and not Zeus appearing as an eagle. Science has historically taken the physical world to be out there, separate from us, and it's not surprising that it has not succeeded in describing consciousness. The outside world cannot be separated from the experience we have of it. Consciousness appears to be a construction like virtual reality. It's an illusion, but no less real for that. There is still a real world, but the true nature is hidden behind the illusion. What we call real is the illusion we most believe in. Ludwig Wittgenstein, while he was a professor at Cambridge at Trinity College, once wondered in front of his students, why do people say it was natural to think that the sun revolved around the earth? For which one student answered, because it looked like that. To which Wittgenstein replies, and how would it look if it was the other way around? Right. I can cut it short, or we have 5 minutes? Okay, I do a little more reading. Okay. When my grandfather was the same age as me, Gavrilo Princip showed the heir apparent. Fate brought the failed student and the future emperor together. The meeting brought immortality to both, and death. They did not know each other. Possibly they exchanged a look. How do you do? Princip and the prince. The prince and the pauper. One thing is certain, they both heard the shots. Since then, in the depths of parks, Gavrilo Princip statues are shooting at Franz Ferdinand statues. The trench warfare of Gavrilo Princip streets with Franz Ferdinand avenues. The gun battle of memorial plaques, museums, medals, films. In Sarajevo, they took down the statue of the Crown Prince. His death, which gave millions a cause to die for, was the crowning achievement of his life. The First World War began as a blood feud. When my grandfather was the same age as me, his fate crossed that of another. Both men were called up as volunteers into the Imperial and Royal Army. Both were sent to the Southern Front, and during the Russian offensive, both to Galicia. Both distinguished themselves. Josip Broz and his company captured an 80-member strong Russian unit, while during a surprise attack, my grandfather received 21 shell fragments and a bunch of medals. When they wanted to amputate his leg, he pulled a gun on the surgeon and ordered him out of the operating room. Within a year, they were both taken prisoner and both lost consciousness in the middle of hand-to-hand combat. They wake up in hospital, and in their fevers, they both haunted by their earlier trauma. My grandfather thinks they want to amputate his leg, while JB accuses the saint hanging above his bed of trying to steal his clothes. After several failed attempts of fleeing, the revolution catches up with them in Russia. Josip Broz is caught by the Bolsheviks and is enlisted in the International Brigade. While lying next to his Russian wife, he suddenly realizes the meaning of historical inevitability. I hate to think what might have happened had my grandfather ended up in the hands of the Bolsheviks. In the hospital where their lives ended before the century had come to an end, the century in which everything was stood on its head, Tito's leg is amputated, and somebody steals my grandfather's clothes. The little differences are crucial, as in our everyday moves, as in genocide. Cain and Abel, Serbs and Croats, Shiites and Sunni. The more similar you are, the more you look at the differences. What bothers us is the similarity without union. Our main problem is not that we are too different, but that we are too similar. We're all limited similarly. It is our limitations that connects us. And what connects us also separates us. So going back to the banana, it is all about how we organize our limitations, in politics, in science, and in the arts as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. We have time for a few questions.
just before the Q&A, I would like to mention that there's apart from the million quotes that I use in this book, I also used a very nice book of a friend of mine for the science parts, Christopher Potter, How to Make a Human Being. I just wanted to make this acknowledgement.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.